Okay, it is 4 o'clock, so I will call to order this special joint meeting with the Planning Board to hear about some preliminary information about our Gen X plan. But first, we have a very special presentation. We have with us Representative Jennifer Bauckham, who has a wonderful presentation for us. So if we yes.
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to invite our water and sewer folks, our water treatment plant manager and our wastewater treatment manager, who this money will go to do two very critical projects. And I thought it was important that they be part of the presentation. So. Okay.
Thanks for letting me do that. Lower your side just a little. Perfect. All right, ready? Thank you.
Thank you. Now, do you want to explain what this is?
Well, I can say a little bit, and then I'll.
Yeah.
So, for our viewers online. Oh, yes, ma'am. So basically, what sold me, John, was that this process and infrastructure with the water waste management was eventually going to help farmers. Like, that's a trigger word for me. I'm always about giving back and helping the community. So I was like, what do you need, John? Tell me how much you need. So it was good that this is going. I love that aspect of it. And I'm going to let you do more details here. But I do know there was a need, and I do want to thank everyone. And John, thank you also for always getting back to me very quickly and for getting it on time. That's part of the process, and for a great relationship. So thank you. I do appreciate you. And Mayor, thank you so much for meeting with me and the board. So I just want to say thank you. It's a great relationship, and I'm here to help the community and in any way I can. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you explain a little bit with that.
Okay, so the biggest part of this project is going to the wastewater plant, and it's for our biosolids dryer. So we have a biosolids now that we haul to a landfill, and this will make us much more sustainable. So we'll be able to make it a Class A sludge, which means we'll be able to give it to sod farms and tree farmers and places around here. It'll save them city money, and it will keep us from being so pigeonholed to just a landfill. So, I mean, that's where the biggest part is going, and it's a big need that we have, and I think it'll be really good for sustainability. Sorry.
And Garrett DeMoss.
And Garrett DeMoss, I apologize.
Who's our
wastewater treatment facilities manager.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we're not used to being seen. We're usually behind the scenes a little bit. I'm Ricky Levy. I'm the water treatment facilities manager on the other side of it. And yeah, our biosolids, his is a sanitary sewer. His is the bigger side of it. And ours is the alum sludge side of it, the biosolids from the water treatment side of it. And his is the bigger side of the project, the thermal dryer, to be able to make it a Class A sludge. So we really appreciate the help on that. That'll give us the ability. We don't have to truck it across the county to his facility, so we really appreciate the help.
Well, I appreciate the offer and common sense and helping the community, and it being a cost saver for you too. So thank you.
Really appreciate the help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, turn this over to Mr. Conant to direct the rest of the meeting.
And I'm going to defer to our planning staff. And since Lou's got the mic, and let him introduce the consulting team.
And I'm not going to try and introduce the consulting team perfectly well, but I will introduce Grant Miyachi, who is with Bolton and Mank and part of our fantastic comprehensive plan consulting team. And Grant, I turn it over to you to talk a little bit about yourself and perhaps introduce your team and
Sure.
get us kicking on this policymakers workshop.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? I'm going to try to project, but I'm awful even in front of a mic. So if anyone in the back, just give me a thumbs up and I'll know to kind of to speak up there. So I'm Grant Miacci. I'm an urban designer and landscape architect with Bolton and Mank, and we've got a great team, half of which our team in Bolton and Mank is setting up for the open house at the library tonight. And the other half of our great team is here with us right now. So we have Jen Gregory from Retail Strategies, focusing on economic development for the town. We have Meg Nealon from Nealon Planning for land use and design and policy. And then Ben Hitchings from Green Heron Planning, focusing on land use and implementation and policy as well. So we've got a really well-rounded group of folks to help with this project. So tonight is going to be less about us talking to you, and there'll be some exercises that Meg will introduce a little bit later, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the engagement that we've done to date. Pass it over to kind of what we've heard in terms of key topics from our stakeholder interviews and from the survey that's recently closed, and then hand it over to Ben for his observations on his policy analysis. And then Ben's going to hand it over to Meg to really talk about some of the, to hear from you and get some input that way. So with that, we're really moving between phase 2 and phase 3 of the project, right? Phase 2 is really organizing ourselves, trying to get the word out as much as we can, getting as much information from you all that we can. That's both data from behind the scenes, but also just listening and kind of talking to as many people as we can. This is that phase where we're still in the listening phase, but phase 3 is where we start to build the bones of the comprehensive plan and the policies behind it. So right now we're kind of still listening. We're going to quickly move into, over the next few months, really taking all that information that we've heard from you and then coalesce that in to a next step. So that means we're about a third of the way through. Tonight was one of the big milestones, one to talk to you all, but also to have our first open house with the public, right? And then in February will be that kind of second round where we will be able to speak with you again, to meet with our kind of focus area roundtables like we did this morning with the Business Advisory Council and the Downtown Committee, and then have a second open house as well. So that will be a lot of things to react to at that time period. So between now and then is when we start to synthesize that information that we've heard. So a lot of that is you all have one of the most engaged staff that we've worked with. So our ability to learn from your residents has really been extended by the ability of your staff to get the word out and to be out there themselves, and the volunteers that have come along with that. So we use a lot of different methods to do that in. And some of it's just building awareness, other is gathering input, and then, even, giving homework, so to speak, for folks to do that. You've seen all this around town, simple things like a postcard to Hendersonville. All those are useful tactics for us to be able to reach as many people as we can. We've talked to a lot of different folks, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in small groups, and such. And what we've heard kind of consistently through this, and this isn't even getting to the survey that we had, which I'll talk a little bit in a minute here, but those key themes from the stakeholder interviews were, balancing growth, the effects of growth, workforce availability. So how do you continue to be a healthy city in the future? How might you direct growth towards corridors, community health, whether that's mental, physical, and spiritual, and then opportunities to improve mobility, meaning how do people move between places? So those came up from day one. You all had some great sessions. We were lucky to attend 2 of them, the conversations, which then started to build on some of those same themes that we heard. And your staff has done an amazing job of being at 35 and more, and 35 and counting, different venues. It might be pop-ups at events. It could have been meetings with the high school, a couple of the high schools attending and giving updates at different meetings and such. So all that leads to a really healthy engagement plan, really trying to engage as many people as we can. Where we have neighborhoods that don't necessarily and haven't necessarily been able to give us the input from traditional methods, we had staff volunteers, community volunteers go out and canvass the neighborhood, right? So that's the folks that may not be as comfortable kind of plugging in with a survey or an online survey and such. So those types of efforts are really, really important to make sure we're reaching as many people as we can as well. The other item that we've really talked about is these kind of take home, I said homework, right? This idea of kind of meetings to go there. And these meetings, we started to coalesce information, right? Take all that information that was hand drawn and people's notes on where growth may be or where housing may be, where jobs need to be, and start to place that kind of digitally around. You can start to see this kind of heat map of where people's preferences are. If you squint, they kind of align with corridors, right? So you can start to see that early input that we got also then kind of backs up some of the, I'd say, middle input, right? Of just saying, if you were making decisions, where would you place things on the site or in the city? So the other thing we did is in many of our communities that we help is a pretty robust online survey that gives us a good amount of information. And you'll notice in the kind of top corner there, or top middle corner. So one is a student survey. The other one was kind of general public, open to everyone. And they're the same questions. We just had to remove some of the demographic information and things like that to allow that to be administered to primarily high school students. But if you look at the total number of participants, we're somewhere in the 4,200, 4,400, and that's an incredible amount of turnout for the size of community that you are. So we really think that there's a good representation from the information that we received from the survey. That's not always the case. So I'm sure you can't read all the colored little lines next to that. But if you take a look at both the key issues from I'll say both generations, because the demographics of the folks in the general plan survey tended to be older, right? Which matches, the community that you live in. And then the younger generation of high school students, so those folks that may be in the community when this plan comes to fruition 20 years, are really aligned quite well. So the top 5 kind of key issues that rise to the top there is housing. And you can see that at least the top 2, right? They just flip: housing and the effects of population growth. So those themes are no different from someone who's 18 or 15 to someone who's 50 or 80. So with that is an amazing kind of alignment between generations, really, in the city as well. So we have a ton more information on engagement, and you can kind of we'll be able to kind of produce a summary report if you don't want to read the raw data, but that's all going to be open and kind of transparent to how you all want to engage with it as well. So if you think about effects of growth, housing, community safety, appearance, environmental health, and quality education, and you can see those types of things. Even in fascinatingly enough, number 4 with economic development, from that's an incredibly powerful statement from folks that may not decide, and hopefully decide to stay in Hendersonville as they graduate from high school, get jobs, and create careers for themselves. So it's an amazing set of information. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Meg.
Thank you, Grant. All right, good afternoon. So at this point in the presentation, we want to talk a little bit about the key topics. That last slide that Grant showed you was important in that you saw the top 5 in each of those surveys. And we're zeroing in at this stage on some of those key topics, paying attention to, okay, what are people saying about these topics? And also, what is the data revealing to us? So if you haven't had a chance yet, you will have an opportunity over the coming weeks to look at the reports that we're issuing now in their draft form, the existing conditions, the policy and ordinance analysis, and the market analysis. And so in those, there's a great deal of information that all of you can digest and start to make sense of yourselves. So in this part of the presentation, we just want to touch on a few things just to give you a glimpse of some of the things that you'll learn as you get an opportunity to dig into those a bit more. But just some of the interesting things that we're seeing. So under the heading of land use and development pattern, we think about that and where growth is going. We always want to ask the question, what's the nature of existing and approved development? We sort of want to know what's that snapshot in time and what exactly are we trying to accommodate? What would we like to accommodate in the coming years? And so when we think about that growth coming, we think about what we love about Hendersonville today, why we came here, why we stayed here, and so on. We're also thinking about things that we want to protect as the community changes over time. And then also, where should new development go? Where should it occur, and what is it? What's the intensity of it? What's the mix of uses, and so on? And when we think about that and we ask those questions, we're looking at the data, we're looking at these survey results and all the other input that we're gathering, we're looking at the market conditions that Jen is shedding light on, and where all that comes together is where we start to get our answers about what's appropriate for the future. We will still test ideas as we go through this process, and that's what we're going to dig into soon. But these are important questions to be asking at this stage. So we'll look at our study area. We'll look at that existing development pattern. We're going to look at what's vacant today, but it's not just what's vacant, because within that you do have some constraints. You have some things that just don't make sense from an infrastructure environmental standpoint. And we also look at committed development. We want to know how that's going to become part of your future development pattern. All of that together, we can start to see that canvas emerging of where development might be supported in the future. And we'll test that as we go forward. The other thing to point out is you do have quite a bit of existing development that we would consider ripe for redevelopment. So that's a question we will also ask in pulling those parcels into that canvas that we will paint, if you will, that future land use scenario. Some of the things that are being answered by the market analysis, and again, you have this whole report that you can be looking at, but we're paying attention to things like what are your gaps? You have a lot of grocery stores in your city limits, but your trade area is huge. So a lot of people come into these grocery stores. So with that, you still have a gap. You still can support more grocery in our overall planning area. So there's a lot of data that we're pulling in to look at what are the kinds of uses that you can stand to support more of. What are some things that maybe aren't here today that you could have that would really respond to what people are looking for that we're already seeing in that. So some of the things that we're asking are along those lines, where people think that growth should go. And interestingly, we got some high percentages around developing at the edges or just outside the city limits, higher than we would have expected. So we're going to explore that as part of the process, but we encourage you to look at these survey results and see what people are saying about where development might happen. We're also looking at housing. You saw in the survey results that was in the top 2 for both the students and the general population. And so we're looking at where you have housing today. So that's all types. And when you look across this in the city and in the larger area that includes your extraterritorial jurisdiction, and those two combined, roughly half of your land area is devoted to residential areas. So what that makeup is, and whether or not there's a greater variety, how that's introduced and integrated into your development pattern is part of what we need to be answering. But the housing types, it was interesting to see the range that people were willing to support when asked in the survey, the kinds of things that they thought might be important. So of course, affordability comes up before people are thinking about also their chapters of life, the stages they've reached. So retirement is on a lot of people's minds, how they can stay here and age in place. But also recognizing, what's the quality of this? Are we creating places that really have that enduring quality that people want to live and contribute to the quality of life that people expect here in Hendersonville? We're also looking at mobility. So, as you continue to grow and change over time, how people move to and through the city is really important. So naturally, your head goes to the road network, but there's so many aspects to that. And what we're seeing is that there's great interest in your bike and ped facilities. So we're looking at the bike and ped network. Beyond your road network, we're also looking at safety, and we're also looking at transit. So there is a portion of the population that depends on that and expects that, and how the population is served is important as well. So a lot of focus on facilities. So when we looked at the survey results, when we're asking questions about that topic, it has to do with the facilities that are in place to support safe walking, support safe biking, and things like that. So those alternative modes came up. A lot of interest in the trail system. So recognizing what's coming and the excitement around that, that's a good thing, and making those linkages so that actually is not just recreation or economic development, but actually serves a transportation need as well. And that brings me to functional open space and green space. So greenways naturally would be a big part of that. Those areas that would support where the greenway network would sit are also those places that could be our creek and river corridors, right? And so the floodplains are part of that. They also have a function in managing stormwater, but then you also have the wildlife habitats and things of that nature. So you can see how a lot of these things that we consider your functional open space that we as human beings enjoy also serve multiple purposes. So we're looking for those assets that are certainly part of your parks and green space system, but beyond that, what other benefits do they offer because of the characteristics of each of those features? So within that, we're looking at the wetlands and the floodplains, the tree cover, water bodies, all those natural systems that are contributing to your natural beauty, as well as some real basic functions of the community. When looking at the facilities, what mattered to people for green space and facilities, it was a lot of attention on the parks, the greenways, the facilities, all the activities that take place in those, and how those are supported with the system now and with what's planned in the future. So you can see some of those quotes there about what people would like to see. So there's a lot of attention on that. We also noted that when people think about the character and quality of this place, what they determined to be the identity of Hendersonville, a lot of that is tied to the natural environment, but it's also tied to downtown. So historic preservation comes up, the quality of development, things like that. So there is interest in that visual appearance, the preservation, but it goes beyond the buildings. So people are also acknowledging that it's about their experiences, what makes people attached to Hendersonville as a whole, and places within that contribute to the character and appearance. So when we looked at, what types of things does downtown need more of, some of the things you would expect. So the cultural and entertainment. Most people see it as the civic heart of the community and expect some of those things to be downtown. Dining, places to exercise, recreate. Housing is coming into this. You see that as the fourth answer on the left side. And then improvements for downtown. There's some focus on the public realm. So when asked that question, a lot of these answers relate to what can be done to the public realm and what can be done under the heading of preservation. So it's a recognition of what people value, but also what could be improved or enhanced to make it an even better experience. And then finally, the community facilities and services. Parks fall in that, and those are one of the things that you can see. So it's gotten a lot of conversation, but what about the things you don't really see or don't think about so much? And of course, unless there's a flood or something, then you really recognize it, right? So the stormwater infrastructure, the transportation network, the utilities, the broadband coverage, all those kinds of things are also important. So when we think about growing and changing over time, how is that infrastructure going to keep up? So the analysis also looks at what you have today so that we can anticipate what we need to be thinking about for the future as this vision for the future starts to come into focus. 15% of the people, when asked, though, they actually said that they were concerned about that. So it did come up as an answer. You'll notice, too, that it's not just about the facilities themselves. but the programs, the services, right? So safety is on people's minds as well. So that was interesting to us. Another aspect of this that Ben is going to cover for you is the policy piece of this, because you already have things on the books.
Meg, can I ask one question before you may have to go back several slides, you may go off the top of your head. One of the things we saw is that you said this part of the survey results was related to growth around the city or on the fringes or just outside. But wasn't there a category, if I remember correctly, there was also a category where a number of folks also thought that redevelopment in higher density was also pretty close to that. Am I thinking wrong if I looked at the data as it relates to where development should
Yes, we have
occur?
33% said outside of the city limits, but within in the unincorporated parts of the county, 28% within existing city limits with increased density. So that's something that we kind of expect that people would want to see some more within their city limits. It would surprise us to go outside of the city limits with such a high percentage.
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing that we need to explore. I think that's
I think where I'm going
because that
from
balance,
a
yeah.
policy maker standpoint, because there's other factors, and I don't want to steer the conversation because this is what y'all have a conversation, and we can move on. But I want to point out that I was pretty close there as it relates to what the community thought, and with Henderson County is doing their comprehensive plan as it relates to protecting our farmland, our agricultural areas, and also we know. A lot of the other things that we've seen as part of the survey, the things people like are inside the city, more urban in nature, greenways, downtown, and also the cost of infrastructure and the cost of sprawl is something that I think as a staff, we have been talking about is to provide those services, and it may not make as much sense. And this is a conversation for the policymakers in the room. It may not make sense for us to think sprawling out. Higher density, closer in. I mean, we do need areas or immediately around the city to grow, but I think we just ought to keep that in mind. And I just want to point out that was a pretty close percentage there as we go forward. And I think it is something we need to dive. So
it's a really important one. And when we come back, when we see you guys again, it's one of the things we'll be talking about is the idea that you can have a little bit of both, but the trade-offs. So when you lean more in one direction, there are trade-offs there when you lean in the other direction. And so it's important to think about things like, what about the infrastructure that we have? What about that existing capacity that we can utilize sooner rather than later? And so, how do we also actually meet the needs of current and future populations by introducing some things in these areas that are already part of our existing development footprint? So that'll be a big question we'll be looking at with you, but show you the pros and cons of different scenarios so that you can kind of see and still be mindful of what it was that people were telling us in this stage of the process.
May I make a comment about that? One of the data points that you guys, that on a slide that I saw, it seemed like the residents or the folks that actually took the survey noted, I think it was like 58% felt like there weren't enough homes in Hendersonville. And so that I feel like kind of directly correlates to this. And maybe people understand that we don't really have a ton of buildable space in the city limits. And so that fringe and ETJ area is really prime for residential development based off of our infrastructure and what makes most sense for our water and sewer capacity.
Yeah.
And so I just thought those two numbers kind of correlated with each other.
That's right. And so, and that's, I think, Jen, you can reel me in, but nationwide, we have a housing shortage, right? So Hendersonville's not immune to that.
Right.
So when we think about that, and especially when we can see that survey result that people support different housing types, well, where they can go, that really gives you a lot of flexibility internally
Right.
of where those different types of units can actually be in the future. So all interesting. Okay. I'll get you back to where you need to be.
Thanks so much, Meg. I'm Ben Hitchings with Green Heron Planning based in Durham. Great to be with you all this evening. One of the things we like to do as part of these engagements with communities to help them update their plans is really take some time to understand your existing adopted policies. What is that existing policy landscape that y'all have? And so one of the items that you have in your packets is a policy analysis that I've prepared, just looking at those existing documents as another input in addition to getting lots of input from the community. And we really focus on 4 different things. If you've delved into, you'll notice that the policy review is organized this way. We look at the consistency of the plans. So the city's plans internally, how consistent are those with each other? How consistent are they with neighboring jurisdictions in the county? When we look at land use and both policies and actual land use, future land use maps. We also look at the consistency of the city's ordinances with its policies. And we have a significant amount of commentary on that because it looks like a number of items from the last plan weren't implemented in the town's ordinances. So that strikes us as an opportunity among many others. We also look at the consistency of investment. So the public investments that the city makes, how consistent are those with the city's plans? What kind of structure does the city have for deciding what things to invest in? And I will tell you, I am really impressed with the capital improvements plan framework that y'all have. You have a very thoughtful approach to identifying and prioritizing capital improvements. So that's something to call out. And then finally, we look at something that we call foundational opportunities. What are some key issues that the community ought to address to position itself for success in the years ahead? So all of that is in the policy review. And you can delve into the details on your own time. But I did want to call out a few topics from the policy review that maybe didn't get fully expressed in the public involvement, just as other things to think about. Some of them are going to strike you as hopefully very common sense. Like, we know that the city has almost twice the population age 65 and older compared with the state of North Carolina as a whole. And we expect that kind of trend to just continue as the baby boomer cohort continues to age. And so how do we be intentional about really trying to make our community age friendly? What does that involve? What kind of investments and programs might support that? Y'all have a very good county plan on aging that provides an opportunity for continued collaboration to continue to support making this a community that works well for the senior population. And one of the things I think we've found in our planning work so often is if the community works well for seniors, it also works well for kids in many cases, if we have safe places to walk and decent housing and transportation alternatives and the like. So that's one issue. Another is gateway appearance. And like so many of you, the first time I came to Hendersonville, I fell in love with the downtown. And I also thought, gee, I kind of felt like I ran the gauntlet in order to get to downtown. So we always have an opportunity to make our community more beautiful. And some of the gateway places present that opportunity for the town. We also know the importance of sustainability, and y'all have demonstrated the importance of that by investing in creating, as I understand it, a new department that is actively working away on this issue. At the same time, usually with this work, and I've confronted it in my work as a planner and planning director in the past, we've got 2 dimensions. We've got our city operations, which we want to make more sustainable and hold up as a model for the community. And then we've got supporting sustainability in the broader community. And so often, as appropriate, we start by focusing on our own operations. It's an excellent place to start. We also, though, however, ought to be thinking about then, as we get our house in order, how can we support greater sustainability, a reduced carbon footprint and ecological footprint in our community as a whole. I worked in my many years ago at the regional scale in the Triangle. And one of the things I was constantly reminded of is in each community, there's a part of our quality of life that we shape directly through the things that we do in our community, the investments we make, the standards we adopt, the partnerships we develop. But then there's a part of the success of our community that really depends on others and our ability to cooperate with others. I think that becomes more and more true as we grow and our boundaries and begin to start to bump into those of jurisdictions around us. So I am frequently reminded of the importance of working together to advance shared goals, and often that is the only way to advance certain goals. Here you have a wonderful small town that also wants to be a 21st century community. You've got a great tourist destination and also a hometown. There are many ways that the community has these sort of contrasting elements. It's a focus of activity in a sea of orchards and forest land. And so but that's part of the beauty of it and the dynamism of it is those differences. How can we, so another issue I'm seeing communities increasingly address is how can we be a welcoming place for everyone who chooses or wants to live in our community. And in so doing, help everyone to make their full contribution to the community. And the dynamism that that diversity brings can add to the life of the community. And then finally, and this is something, I'm also an adjunct faculty member at the UNC School of Government, and one of the projects we're working on right now is some resources to help communities better prepare themselves for a rapidly changing world. I feel like we all got a crash course in that during the pandemic, where community, local government, and others almost overnight had to try and move more services online, set up testing centers, set up vaccination sites, help downtown businesses weather the economic impacts of the pandemic and the like. And so that is events like the pandemic, while it feels exceptional, are probably, that kind of disruption is probably going to be more, we're going to see more of that in the future. There will be, whether it's environmentally based disruption or economic or social or technological. There's a lot I think we can learn in terms of how to improve our readiness and our resilience so that we can weather those events more successfully and help our community members, everyone in our community, weather them more successfully, and also improve our readiness to respond effectively to those kinds of disruptions. So that's another opportunity, and it just so happens there'll be some resources from the School of Government coming out in the months ahead to help you all with that. All right, so we've seen a lot of information on public involvement. We've heard a little bit of, we've heard some really good insights on connecting that to different physical features in your community. We've heard a little bit about policy considerations and issues that y'all have been working on for a while in the community. And so I wanted to just offer some early observations, and this will be a continuing conversation that we'll have together as we draft this plan together and help you develop an exciting updated vision for the community for the years ahead. One of the things, and this is really drawn from collectively from our team, strategies and techniques and considerations that we're seeing other communities use that are confronting some of the issues that y'all are confronting here in Hendersonville. One of the strategies is mixed-use development, combining offices and homes and shops seamlessly into a functioning place instead of separating them. Now, there are plenty of examples of places where we want to have commercial development in one place and housing in another place. But we also have a chance to mix those kinds of activities in selected locations and create kind of an activity center, if you will, and activity centers, for example, that could complement the wonderful downtown activity center that you already have. When we look at that strategy and think about it in terms of y'all's context here, we see it touch a lot of issues, a lot of the issues that have come out in the public input to date. One, you have an opportunity to focus development and reduce the development footprint and the extent that it maybe consumes the working landscape that a number of folks have identified as being important. It's also a place, it also gives us an opportunity to help provide essential services. We love the downtown. The downtown is vibrant and dynamic and interesting and offers us many things, but it doesn't meet all of our daily needs quite often. This is true for main streets across North Carolina. So where are there other places where we can get essential services to help complement our needs? We heard about infill and redevelopment. A vacant site with a shuttered building is is not very helpful in any way, right? And so how can we catalyze redevelopment, take some of the growth pressure, the growth energy from the people who want to be in your community, which is a reality that y'all have, and if guided, can be a real asset and can help us bring vitality back to places that maybe are not very vital at the moment. These mixed-use developments also give us a chance to allow folks to come there, if they're not already living there, and park once and maybe meet several of their needs before hopping back in their car and going elsewhere. And so if we connect them and design them well and make them walkable and bikeable, we can begin to reduce the number of trips we need to take by car on our roadways. So one way to help contribute to managing the growth in traffic. This is also a great location for housing quite often. And we have seen a boom in downtown housing in communities across the state and around the country. And also the growth in housing is a component of these activity centers, literally bringing people to the doorstep of shops for those who want that lifestyle. The beautiful thing that y'all have is y'all have lots of different existing kinds of residential opportunities. You can live in a single family dwelling and the like. Activity centers can be a great place for more compact residential development, townhomes, lofts, condominiums, apartments, and can give us a chance to broaden the housing choices in a way that also helps us address housing affordability. And then finally, these are locations that also can support business growth and business development and be dynamic locations that have some character and some curb appeal for patrons of prospective patrons of businesses. So we have remarked in our conversations as a consulting team that this particular strategy does seem to hit on a number of things that folks have mentioned. Another topic is community image, and we've talked a little bit about gateway opportunity to continue to improve the quality of the gateway experience so that the welcome mat of the community is one that engages people. Another technique for building the community image, of course, is branding. And talking with Allison, I know, Justice, I know, there she is back in the control room, that there have been a lot of branding efforts by other entities, the downtown, the county, the Economic Development Partnership and the like. And maybe there's an opportunity to sort of revisit the city's brand as well as part of that mix, and continue to communicate the wonderful image that you have to build on, derived in part from your downtown. We also know that the county context and the larger region contributes to the community image of a vibrant small town in the mountains. And I know from personal experience hiking with my wife, one of our favorite hikes is the hike in the Pisgah up to Looking Glass Rock. You're sort of a gateway to the Pisgah and other points of interest in the mountains, as well as the fun things to do right here. So community image is a topic that we'll continue to revisit. We've already talked a little bit about the natural environment and the distinctive natural assets you have. Meg talked about that. That is something that you can really leverage in service to that community brand, and also to the opportunities that you continue to provide to your residents and visitors to do distinctive things that they will always associate with Hendersonville. We've talked a little bit about resilience, and I want to come back to that topic because North Carolina is the first state in the country to have a state office of digital equity and inclusion. And the state is really doing an amazing job of harnessing some of the new federal dollars to invest in broadening access to broadband. There's a study that was done recently that estimated that 91% of the jobs in North Carolina require digital skills. And we know, so whether you're someone who's trying to work in the workforce or you're a student trying to learn and you have a remote learning opportunity, access to broadband is becoming more and more fundamental. Again, many of us discovered this, if we didn't already know it, during the pandemic. So that's something y'all have been making investments. This part of the state shows up a little brighter in terms of greater access to broadband, but there's still more opportunity in that regard. And then finally, something we'll talk about increasingly as we start to talk about the implementation component of the plan is leveraging resources. Based on the input that we've heard from folks so far in our public engagement work and the like, there are a lot of needs and desires for things that the city can contribute to enhance the quality of life. Not surprising. Folks are sharing their aspirations and their needs with you. And the challenge for us, of course, if you're in local government, is you're working in a resource-limited environment. So how can you get more out of what you're already investing? We've got a spectrum of strategies. I will tell you, in doing this work in a number of communities, there is no silver bullet usually in this regard, but instead, if you take things that you're already doing and maybe take them to another level, you can find ways to leverage the existing resources you have to do some of the interesting and needed things that folks would like to see. So one of our tools is our development standards. What do we ask for and expect from new development? Now, when we communicate those expectations, they have to be related to the impact that that development will have on our community. But quite often, communities are not asking for or communicating everything that might be appropriate or possible. So that is one opportunity. I'm a former planning director in several communities in North Carolina. One of the things that was tremendously helpful for me as I tried to implement plans that had been adopted by our governing board was to have some funds to help work out the details of those implementation projects so that I could then pitch them more convincingly to John, Mr. Connett, and the town manager of Community X. And so that is something that actually can help accelerate the implementation of a plan if there are some funds, all with the focus of working out the details of the implementation projects to help them get on the ground more quickly. Another key principle is advancing multiple objectives. You have a lot of objectives that you're trying to pursue or are interested in that bear some relationship to each other. And so maybe thinking more intentionally about will this project both help with sustainability, help with redevelopment, maybe help us deliver a new service? Maybe increasingly projects will tick several of those boxes and may really represent a wise investment for you. Another thing we're seeing in North Carolina, and this is with conversations I have with folks at the School of Government, is technology. Right now, local governments in North Carolina are investing maybe 1% to 3% of their annual budget in information technology. Shannon Tufts, the director of the Public Technology Institute at the School of Government, thinks that local governments really ought to think about investing more on the scale of what the business community invests in technology. They're investing 8 to 13% in technology. And whatever that looks like for your community, there are certainly an increasing range of options, software, programs, systems. You always, of course, want to make sound investment in those, but some of those can really help you deliver service more efficiently, more effectively, and at a higher quality. We also are in a time of significant state and federal grants, particularly with the bipartisan infrastructure law. Y'all, of course, had COVID money under ARPA. But there are other opportunities out there. I know this is something that the city staff are already doing, is trying to identify and leverage state and federal grants where those exist. There may be additional opportunity in that regard at this time because of the relative wealth of federal money. And then finally, another strategy for leveraging our resources is partnerships. Are there community organizations, institutions? I was surprised to learn sometimes hospitals have foundations with funds that could be paired with local government funds to maybe advance physical activity to help you build a trail. So continuing to explore those partnership opportunities in your community can be another dimension of your efforts to maximize the public investment that y'all make in improving the community. Again, we will talk about this last issue more as we get into implementation. Now it's time for a little group activity. Y'all have been so patient with us, and so I'm going to turn it back to Meg to take us through that.
So appreciate your attention through all of that. You can see it's a lot of information that's been coming through the first third of this process, right? And so you're digesting this with us. But it's at this stage as we're starting to connect these dots and look at the range of opportunities that are in front of us that we really want to really start thinking about the future. So Ben just went through a series of things that as we digest all this, we think, there are some really great opportunities for Hendersonville. We think that, we don't have to keep doing things the way we've always done them. And the beauty of a planning process is you can start to bring forward some of these ideas that can lay the groundwork for some really positive changes that you might want to engage in so that you can arrive at the future you'd really like to see. So at this point, you are receiving... and I'm just going to flash a little something up here. You're receiving Post-it notes that we're going to collect from you in a little bit. But the idea is we want you to close your eyes for a second. Think about all the things that you've just heard and things that you've been thinking about since we started this process. And on the sheets of paper, I think there are 3 in each stack, but you can certainly have more. On each one, write a single word or a phrase, and you can do multiples, a single word or phrase that captures your ideas for the future. What are the kinds of things that just don't worry about wordsmithing or anything? It really is just the words and phrases that come to mind for you that when you think 20 years down the road, what should be true about Hendersonville? What would you like those words or phrases to be to describe that future place? And so we want to use this to add to all of this input that we've been getting so far through the process. So again, just one thing on a sheet, and if you want to do 5 or 10, you're welcome to. But jot down those words or phrases, and we're going to collect those from you. And then we're going to post them up on the wall. We'll stop the presentation in a minute. But we're going to put those together and see what kinds of things emerge as with those groupings of what you put down on these pages. And then we'll talk about those, and then as we look at those together, we'll then come back to what's starting to shape up as an initial but not final, very draft set of goals and strategies, objectives that are being tested early on. See how those compare. So we'll give you a few minutes to write down those words and phrases. If you just have one, that's fine too. But just keep one word or phrase to each of those sheets, and we'll collect those and put them up. Ben, do you want to add anything to this exercise assignment, or?
Just flag me down when you have stuff for us to pick up.
We can all do that. So.
I'm going to turn that one off.
Okay. Okay. If you don't use yours up, you're allowed to give it to your neighbor. If your neighbor uses your sheet.
The big wall.
So we're gonna. Here you go, guys. And we can move them around. There's a reason we're using sticky Post-it notes. We wanted to see generally the categories that you all are coming up with. And so the first one was really about the people. So a place that's welcoming to all, that there's a sense that we're an integrated community, diverse community, that there's respecting people's rights, those kinds of things. And there's a generational aspect to that as well as it seems when we look at some of the others. And then we put a few related to housing, available and affordable, housing for all ages, reasonable cost of living. So, thinking about everybody who's here today, who wants to stay here, and people who will be coming in the future. What is that housing picture for all the different segments of the population? And then on that note, a place for future generations, fun for all ages. So thinking not just about one part of the population, but everybody here now and in the future. Traffic solutions, so the fourth column really has to do with mobility. So solutions that support continuing growth, a transit system, bypass, recognize some of these traffic issues, and then a non-vehicular Main Street. So that maybe could be moved around, but we wanted to start there. So all of these can move if you think it fits in a better category. So I would put that under mobility. And then we had a bunch that sort of described the feel and character of the place. That is quaint, it's beautiful, there's pride in the place. Here we go, here are our headers. There's a quality to it, there's a vibrancy to it, and that the historic setting is part of that look and feel also. And then we move on to the next one. There's the notion of sustainability and the natural environment. So specifically water quality and the natural beauty being preserved. And that Hendersonville is known for this. Emphasis on arts and culture. We put that with family places for children's activities. So, that's probably a broader heading of, the things to do as some of the younger folks are looking for. But what are the activities that people are enjoying in Hendersonville at all ages, perhaps? And then we have responsible growth and sophisticated development with true greenways to form. So there's something about the pattern of development there that we're trying to get at. And then the last two columns. So the last one is about the opportunity, their workforce, financial opportunity for all, and education. So the ability to grow and develop over time. And then the last one being health. So I think you might be able to see some of them from here. You're laughing at big guys with their health. Yeah. That's right. That should move to the front of the list, right? So, so we'll look at those. Do you see anything, assuming you can read some, maybe not all of these, is there anything you would pick up and move to a different category, or would you change the topic altogether? Is there something that you think isn't quite right? You want to pick it up and move it to its own category? Like maybe we didn't need to blend education and employment.
So education is that employment education, and with that for sustainability. Sustain high education.
Oh, okay.
This one, you wanted it under sustainability?
I would.
Okay. You were the author?
No.
Oh,
but I would
okay.
put it
We can- Let's add something. We can add one. So sustainability education.
Anything else? Is anybody else seeing something like maybe there's a pattern emerging here, or a topic that's emerging as really important, or a topic that's missing? Like, are you surprised that something's not up there now that you see the whole collection? So the second column. But there's a strong emphasis on the affordability. Like, so one observation, one of the things that you should see is that, and that was one of the struggles with where to put education, that there's a lot of overlap, right? So, and you pointed out that without health, we can't do any of this stuff. And so there are a lot of things that, and this is why it's all kind of mushy at this stage, and everything's in draft form when we talk about goals and objectives. But the most important thing is that we're coming up with some things that when you guys think about the future and think about what should be true about Hendersonville 20 years from now, or even 10 years from now, these are the kinds of things that we all need to be paying attention to, and the goals and objectives that lead you forward that come through the plan have to serve that purpose of as the plan is developed, but also you will find yourselves in situations where the plan doesn't give a specific answer around a particular topic, and your goals have to give you that guidance to make sure, like, are we all still singing from the same hymnal? Do we have the message that we need?
Meg, one thing related to the health, and we could keep it out on its own, but I really think from a health perspective, and I'm just throwing something out here, it also could fit under intergenerational, because when we say health, we want, an opportunity for, having parks and recreation for all ages, and for health, and walking, because we really want it to really not just be health for one specific age, it's for everybody. If that makes sense, for it to be a healthy community, it really ought to be, I think, thinking about, because we have been such a retirement community for such a long time. I think as it relates to focus, I think health is important for our older folks, but it's also, we got to have those activities for our younger generation. So very much intergenerational.
Yeah, and so people naturally go to what are the conditions that we're facing as we age, but it really is, the whole picture, your health and well-being. It's your mental, emotional, spiritual, everything that you can
And even the consolidation of healthcare systems. This is such a broad category that's really important, because if we don't maintain a strong healthcare system in our community, we won't be strong in 2050, 2060. So really to attract people, to be that holistic community, health really, it goes not only intergenerational, but even from an economic development, it is such a critical component. So that would just be as we think about health, that's the way I would think about it. Not only our own personal health, but as groups, but as a community where people will want to work and live. So
you can thrive at all ages here.
That's right.
Really.
Then I also look at like specialists.
Okay.
People are going outside of Henderson County to
Okay.
go to the doctor, like Charlotte, Duke, areas like that. My mom, all her doctors is in Charlotte. So, you're going outside of home, Henderson County, or the city of Hendersonville.
Resources, yep.
So that's what, okay.
If you're truly a complete community, you should
Yes,
have some more of those resources here, right?
yes,
Got it.
yes.
Okay. All right.
Also, with the environment, if you don't have a good, clean environment, you're not going to have much else. Oh, sorry. I just,
Yep. Folks who are. Yeah, folks who are in the health field would argue that health should be considered in all aspects of planning for the future, right? So we definitely hear that.
I am surprised that I don't think Parks is up there anywhere.
Right. I mean, maybe you could make the jump with, Fun for All Ages or
You could
other
definitely
things,
make the jump
greenways could
because
be-
that was the intention.
But for all that we've heard so far, I'm too surprised that Parks didn't specifically get called out.
There was a touch of the parks was preserving the natural beauty. That was
Yeah.
via pocket parks, things like
Okay,
that. It was
sure.
just a general shot at it.
Sure.
My observation really is the biggest problem that Hendersonville has right this minute is traffic. And like you said, trying to get downtown is like a battle. And you get on Four Seasons and you're sitting at green light, you can't go anywhere. Because the traffic is so bad and any time between 11 and 5. It's really bad. If you did infill on a 2-lane road, you put one apartment complex on a 2-acre piece of land and you've got 30 families in there. 60 cars more than likely going onto that 2-lane road.
That's right. And that's some of and the reason Ben brought up the concept of mixed use, we're going to test some ideas that look at how land use and transportation relate to each other. And so that distribution in your land use pattern and how all of your infrastructure supports that is a big question. So
Yeah.
you're feeling some of those growing pains.
Well, and what I'd like to see is that before they start saying where we should be building, we should be looking at a corridor for some bypasses and not put houses there and then have to come and bulldoze them all, because then it becomes way too expensive.
Yep, that's that road planning piece of it, or network, not just the road planning, but the whole network planning, right?
Right, yeah, I mean, that should be a part of the city's concern is, okay, where should we not put houses? Where should we not put houses or industry or whatever until we've got a road? Something where people coming down from Asheville can get on 64 West without having to come right through downtown. The tractor trailers, I'm so glad we didn't buy in that building that's right there on the corner of 6th and Main Street in the condos, because the tractor trailers are using their Jake brakes going up and down that hill. And the noise is constant. It's huge tractor trailers that aren't serving a local business. They're just trying to get from point A to point B.
Now, these are all good points. So you can kind of see how when we talked before about trade-offs, we'll be looking at things like, well, what if development went in this direction, philosophically, if it took on this type of form, what can we solve in the way of infrastructure? What can we protect that we value, whether it's historic resources or the environment? So you're shedding light on some of these things that are so important in a planning process like this. We can ask those questions, and we can also flip it and say, well, what if we went a different way and we looked at a development pattern that did this? What would we gain from that? We don't know exactly what that is today. We have some sense of some of the things that we want to test, but that's what we'll be bringing back to you. But I wanted to show you any other comments about what
I just have some comments about your comments. Excuse me. I don't know how long have you lived here?
Since 99.
So I don't know if you heard the discussion or if you recall the discussion about the Balfour Parkway, right? Do you remember that one that came up through DOT? And that was radically shut down by residents. And so the talk of bypasses has been a huge topic for, I mean, probably 20 years here. And those bypasses and those road improvements get shut down just as fast as they get brought up by the residents. And part of the plan here is to talk about these corridors, talk about Spartanburg Highway, talk about 4-lane roads where we can create mixed-use development, where we can allow developers to come in, and if they can follow certain guidelines, that we can create affordable housing projects, and we can do these things in areas that we're kind of predetermining, not necessarily 2-lane roads. But unfortunately, what we can do here is very different than what the DOT and the state kind of, and if we sit and wait on them, we're in big trouble. I mean, like big trouble. And so I think working with what we have right now, which is we do have good entrances into the city and corridors right now that make sense for some development. And so getting guidelines from y'all and of how we can do that, I think is really important.
Well, I was living in Asheville in the 60s when they were trying to cut down Bowcatcher Mountain and put 240 through there. And the residents fought it for 20 years, and finally the state says, to heck with it, we're doing it anyway. And now everybody is saying, how did we do without it? Because I used to have to drive through the tunnel going back. We lived out in Hall Creek, and to get to work, I had to drive through the tunnel.
An observation in all the things that we listed. Oh, geez. And not that I need this. In all the things that we listed and all the growth that we talk about, no one wrote down expanding city limits. So we want a lot of bang for our buck. I live in the ETJ. So stay where you are. I am very happy. And yet we have contractors that come and say, we got to be annexed in, I need the sewer. Oh, they got to have sewer. So they got to be, we're going to annex you in. 2 people in my area got to have sewer. 2 houses, 3 houses. Annexed in, gotta have sewer. The rest of us don't. So that just amazes me when we talk about growth and expansion and where we're going to put activity centers. We never say expanding the city limits. So that's just a observation.
Mm-hmm. I think Ben is capturing that. No pressure, Ben.
Going to give him writer's cramp.
I wrote well, I'm pretty loud anyway. I wrote workforce, and I also wrote a place for future generations. I think about my children, one who's moved away and will never come back, but my other child, we need a good workforce, but we also need high-paying quality jobs for these kids to have. And then I think that goes right into the available and affordable housing. But I think that, we've got to have a workforce. Somebody's got to do what I and probably all of us use every day and want to have access to.
So this is interesting because when you think about planning for the future and you think whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, most of us naturally answer it from our own perspective. What do I want? What do I expect out of my city? How do I want to live in this place? But when you can get outside of yourself and ask the question, what is it that my children would expect if they stay here, come back here? What is it that my aging parents would need if I want them to come live here if they don't already, or you want them to stay and not have to leave Hendersonville? what kinds of things when we think about the population or the city thriving for the next several decades, what does the population composition look like? Could we ever get to that composition if we're not looking at it through that lens? You know, how do you have that population here in the future that really is that, you know, more complete community with the resources if we are only looking at it through that single lens? And so,
Meg, one comment I want to get real quick, because that's a great segue back to Barbara's question. Barbara, and again, I'm the guy that has to come up with the budget, right? So, and I'm this is John Conant, city manager opinion. So just say what it is. As it relates to, you talk about why the city has to grow and why it's not, is all these amenities we want come at a cost. And the only thing we have control over is the tax base of the city. I'm just being straight. So if the city's not growing, all these amenities that we want won't ever happen. And so I think it's important to remember that, folks make a choice living in the city or not living in the city. But as it relates from a city perspective, if we don't have people living in the city and we're not growing, if everybody lives on the fringe and nobody is paying for these amenities, then we don't have them, or the people that are in the city limits are paying more than their fair share if the whole county is using the amenities and not paying their share. Unfortunately, we've asked for sales tax opportunities for additional revenue. Our state legislators, and I wish Representative Balcom had stayed, but if we were able to distribute the cost of government more, that would be great, but we're not able to do that right now. And so the only way we can do is grow the tax base. And that but I think from a city's perspective, we all recognize that there's diminishing returns from a sprawl. Sometimes at some point you lose that rate of return or return on investment. So I think what we want to do is from our perspective, is a controlled growth as it relates to what is a reasonable urban boundary where we have room to grow over time, but not be, we don't want to be in Edneyville, where if we looked at Jennifer's map from retail strategies as it relates to where our commercial influence is, that's way more than a geographical area that we would want to be. It's just not doable and not sustainable. But there needs to be the ability for the city to grow, and if only the 16,000 folks that live in the city now are paying for it, either we won't have it or people can't afford to live here, and the quality of life will not be what the whole county wants.
So I could piggyback on top. Sorry. Yeah.
We have to grow, both economically for jobs, because otherwise that's why cities die.
Right.
But we don't want to be like Asheville, which grew like a big giant monster. And now, I sit on Sweeten Creek Road and want to die because it's a 2-lane road with thousands of people driving on it. So I think some of the responsible growth is absolutely necessary if we're actually going to survive.
With the city limit coming all the way down to Airport Road.
If you look too at how much property is within the city limits that pays no taxes, what is it, $500 million in property that is within the city limits that pays no taxes? And if we...
Somebody's got really
Yes,
nice
ma'am.
traffic somewhere around here.
Yeah, it's $500 million, and
Mr. Polly's on maternity leave.
yeah.
So let's think about that. Look at this collection. Maybe we want to change colors of pads, but thinking about these things that you all are raising and maybe looking at it.
It's been hijacked.
Through that lens, would you put yourself in the shoes of somebody else that, when we think about the community as a healthy, thriving system with different people living here 10, 20 years from now, is there anything that you would add to this set that recognizes something that should be true about the city in the future, to get to that place where you really do have that healthy diversity, the growth that you all are talking about, that that ensures you really can function and have these amenities and so on, that the positive aspects of
Can
change.
you say that again, what you want us to write down?
So put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, whether it's a future young person moving here, somebody who's choosing to move here in 10 years to age in place. It can be a relative or not. Or when you think about the workforce expanding, having talent here to keep the job growth going, those kinds of things. What else would you add to this set? We'll put it on a different color. What else would you add to this set of things that needs to be true about this city if you are trying to make sure a wider variety of folks are interested in being part of Hendersonville's future and continuing to turn it into a super thriving city?
One word or less?
Yes.
Okay.
One word or one phrase.
If you need a second Post-it, just raise your hand.
Okay.
We have a local paper, and I just hate that.
Yeah.
Good. We lie.
This is, we've got,
I have a story.
we've got a lot of stuff for kids to do, but people don't know it.
My son.
I mean, we've got the Children's Museum, the Activity Museum, we've got the Geology Museum, we've got the Botanical, the Bullington Gardens has a fairy garden for kids, and
See?
yeah, there's just a lot
My daughter's 20.
out there for kids. I don't know, especially visitors. We've got a peppermint bear scavenger hunt downtown, where the kids can take, and they look for different things downtown.
I went to
and fill out a
UNCA
card.
myself in the 80s, yeah. I stayed here and first, my first year and a half I commuted. Then I moved to Buncombe County. See, in the 80s, I could get 2 camps in 30 minutes.
So what I think was interesting is in the survey, not a whole lot of attention on economic development or jobs. And so I noticed now, like, it's popped up when it comes to employment and those types of things, but also internet. So technology, when you're starting to think about these younger generations, like, wait a minute, we can't function 10, 20 years from now if we don't have some attention on that, right? So those are good. Any other observations, even underscoring things like inclusivity and affordability and transportation? Yeah, with some of the, okay.
Kinds of employment opportunities for supporting entrepreneurs, research and IT, the importance of trades, and supporting them through the community college system, job training. Now, of course, people's careers, they go through a number of different careers quite often over the course of their working life, and so job training is so important.
You have a lot of people that are, I know people that live here that work in other counties. So that's.
Yep.
They have to commute.
Yeah.
Been here, but they work somewhere else.
There's an awful lot of jobs in town.
look like in the future.
How many stores you go into and there's only 3 people running the whole store?
What were you saying, Jen?
I think we also, you guys bring up some really good points. And as we think about what do those jobs look like in the future, that relates to where the housing is and where the commercial is, because a lot of those jobs are going to be at home, on the computer. We're seeing so much more of that. I don't think that's a COVID thing, and I think as companies become more global and as Gen Z wants more flexibility, those jobs that I think you or someone over here was speaking about, your kids, that you want them to stay, it's not most certainly going to be driving into an office or to a location, a job location. It may just be working from their home. So what does that look like as it's mixed with the housing and the commercial? And so just kind of something to think about.
I have something to say about that. Personal story, but my sister, so I can give away all of her personal information, has a very good paying job, over $80,000 a year for a local company in Henderson County. She was going to buy a house that she had under contract with me, about 2 miles from her company, less than, in the northern part of the county, but less than a half a mile off 25 North. Guess what she didn't have less than a half a mile off 25 North? No internet access. And so she couldn't do it. She couldn't buy and I'm really surprised. I've had multiple clients have to go to Polk County and Transylvania County. Both have better internet access than we do in Henderson County, which is surprising to me. But I don't know what can be done about that.
Do we
I'm
have
sure
a
some
map?
of you great people
I
do.
say, do we have a map that shows where?
No, so
There's.
I don't want to get,
Yeah.
I don't want to get too deep in but the broadband companies keep that very close to the vest, and they do not share it. And so there's very unreliable. The only thing you can do, I think, Beth, I think you know this as a realtor, is you've got to call and say, what kind of service do but there's no map to show where there is coverage, and not that I've ever seen.
And there's been a lot of conversation about that should be put on our MLS, because it's as important as septic access, sewer access, water access, wells, all of that.
We saw what happened when COVID hit, and for the schools.
Yeah.
It became a real challenge.
It's going to have to come mandated from the state and federal level, because the local government doesn't have the authority, and the companies, the broadband companies, do not want to share because they're like, well, if I don't have it here, the competition is going to come in on top.
Right.
So it's very limited data.
So the federal level can force them to.
That's where it's going to have to come from.
Okay.
So.
That makes sense. I'll tell people that when they're asking me, like, why don't we know this information?
Okay. Well, we've got 30 minutes left with you, so we would like to share with you and I think we need to pull down can we pull the screen back down and put it back up again? We're having Allison do some real gymnastics today, testing her range of skills here. We'll capture that. Oh. So what you're going to see is very much in draft form. We want your attention on the goal statements, knowing that there's some wordsmithing of and really putting some meat on the bones of the objectives that will be drafted. Watch this magic. So this is our first cut at some goal statements. I think we have 11. Is that where we ended up? 10 or 11? 10. So this is just derived from all of the input that we shared with you earlier in this meeting. So we're getting input this evening at the open house, and we're going to be blending what we just heard from you over the last 45 minutes or so, and really shaping these. But vibrant neighborhoods. So people often think first of what's their quality of living in a community when they're assessing from that standpoint. So. Some of the key words that they be safe, well-maintained, diverse, connected. A second one was abundant housing choices, and that hits on a whole bunch of things like the availability of different choices depending on your stage of life or, just the kinds of things that you need out of your housing, but also the affordability is a big part of that. The condition and quality. So we saw a lot in the open-ended questions and notes about the quality of housing that's being built specifically and not wanting to see inexpensive or cheaper products going up. A third one was healthy and accessible natural environment. So it is about the natural environment, but what are all the ways that our natural environment supports healthy living? So that can be recreation, especially passive, protecting the water quality, keeping these natural systems intact. So that's our green infrastructure. So when people talk about stormwater and water quality or being able to support habitats, a lot of that happens in those natural systems. Ben talked before about compact development and some of those things. So we did hear from some folks in those comments about our ecological footprint or how far out do we really need to have our development pattern go. And then the working landscapes. So yeah, a lot of that agriculture is outside of our planning area, but when we think about just the working landscapes, even that which still remains inside the city and is part of your natural area, it, like Ben was pointing out, it contributes to the identity of the place. Authentic community character. It's always an interesting one because people have a different idea or definition of what character is. But there was enough expression of that through all of the ways that we were gathering input that we know people were talking about downtown a lot, talking about the gateways, historic preservation, arts and cultural activities, the quality of development again, and local businesses. How do people experience this place? What do they remember? And does it feel unique to Hendersonville? And some of that comes through the nature of the businesses that are here. Safe streets and trails. So it's not just about a network that delivers the mobility that you expect in the city, but is it also safe? That touches on lighting, that touches on people's ability to navigate it, ADA accessibility, and so on. So we're looking at that. We just talked about reliable and accessible utility services, broadband being one of those. So that touches on a wide variety of things, but your water supply, how wastewater is treated, all those things that are really utility related would fall under that type of goal of being able to expect that in the future. Satisfying work opportunities. So we had that one category of education and employment kind of linked together, and some of the things that we're seeing in the input and seeing in your opportunities that the data would point to is that you do have opportunities to grow that from a learning perspective and from growing in your career or vocation, that's something you can pay attention to, and a welcoming and inclusive community. So that also came up in the language that you all were talking about. So accessibility is a part of that. But we also noticed that when people talked about the public realm and what they can do as a community, the coming together and feeling like we're all part of the same place, that was in it. And then the last two, accessible and available community uses and services. So that's delivered both by the public sector and the private sector. So when people talk about what they want in the future, there are elements to that are driven by what the private sector is going to participate in, and then there are the things that are more publicly driven that are in support of that growth and change that you want to see over time. And then finally, and Ben spoke a lot about this, but the idea of it being a resilient community. So people hinted these things, and we put some words to the kinds of things that might be the objectives for why you want to be a resilient community over time. So again, these are very draft. I think that was the end of it. Yes. These are very draft. And so we like the fact, at least I was seeing a lot of agreement in the things that you were volunteering, but it will help us put a finer point on some of the lists that you're seeing here. So we'll take this input this evening and see what we hear at the open house this evening and keep going forward with this so the goal statements and the objectives that live under them get a bit more solid and are really true to what Hendersonville is expecting out of the future. So customized or tailored for Hendersonville specifically. So any additional thoughts on that? We'll wrap up with a little bit about next steps that Grant will take us through, just process-wise, right? But any thoughts about that as you see these draft lists and knowing we're still going to keep working on these, but did anything jump out at you as interesting or missing the mark in any way?
I would say there are a lot of goals and objectives there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them jump out at me as better served with an ordinance rather than a comp plan,
Okay. Okay.
like the connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
We honestly look at the comp plan when something is happening. Like, what should we do here? So I think that it would be helpful if some of them would be identified as this goal would be better achieved with an ordinance rather than a comp plan.
Yep. And so when we get to that stage of the project where we're talking about implementation, it's a combination of tools. And what we'll see is that there are a whole host of tools that can be applied under a lot of these goals. But I think you're right. There are some things where the regulatory direction may be stronger than other mechanisms, right? And so as we get to that stage, we will test that. But I think you bring up a really important point that we can't say enough in any of these processes, and that is the plan crafts that vision, right? It provides that framework. So when we talk about what are the right regulations for Hendersonville, do we have the right things on the books today? Do we not have the right things? And so this gives us a new lens to evaluate what's on the books, but also see what's missing, see what can be improved. And so we need this to lay the groundwork for a better set of regulations to be applied here locally in the future so that you can actually achieve what people are saying they expect in the future. So the two go hand in hand. So the work you're doing right now is that refreshed, updated look of what should we be doing? What is that path forward? And then the regulatory tools are applied. But we will point that out as we get into, and Ben and Grant, I don't know if you want to add anything to that if you still have a microphone, but basically those are I think your point is well taken. We need to point out those places where we have an opportunity to strengthen the regulatory framework to make sure what people are saying they expect in the future can actually be achieved.
Yeah, as long as that's part of the plan, yeah.
Yep, that's right. So if you say it in the plan and it gets adopted, it gives you more strength to be able to make that change in the regulations.
It's an important second step for any planning process, right? Is alignment. To be able to align your policy and your regulations is just necessary. So, take years, right? But it is, thank you, it is a necessary second step there that we always identify. So that I think that's great.
Yep. Anything else that you all are seeing that surprised you or warrants more conversation?
I just have like a couple comments about just smart growth and how growth is actually very necessary for us. And I think too, just looking at like, our population is 15,000, but we play like 45 or 50 during the day, right? So you have all these county residents that come into the city, and not just county residents, I mean, tourists and visitors and family and friends who come into the city and use the services, right? Hospitals, doctors' offices, churches, roads, like all of those things. Our fire and EMS services are heavily utilized by people who are not residents necessarily. And so all of those things have a cost to maintain. And so somebody has to pay for it. And so that's why I feel like the growth is a really necessary component to this discussion. And I just want to just kind of make that point again, that we play a lot bigger than we really are. And then when I say are, as in like what we're collecting revenue to pay for the services. And so I just think it's really important to kind of make that point.
Okay, great. All right. So, anybody else? All right. Well, we appreciate your attention and your participation in that exercise. That certainly helps make our job easier. So, with that, we'll talk a little bit. Do you want to do it from there or just I think-
Right here,
Yeah.
now that I have a mic.
Who's in control?
So, yeah, the immediate next steps is we're going to the library to, for the last half of the open house tonight. Like I mentioned before, February is really the next major milestone where we'll be back in front of you, back in front of the public from the open house. In between now and February, we'll start to craft these draft policies and goals, a draft land use map with scenarios, as Meg mentioned, and then move on from there. So we have, I think, in January of another CAC meeting. So there we go. Perfect. So you can read the two next big stakeholder meetings that we have. So now's and I hate to use car-related things all the time. Rubber hits the road now, right? We have to take this information and synthesize it into a series of maps and policies for you all to react to. Did we capture what we heard, and does it do what essentially what you want it to do for the future? So there's the next steps that way. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Yeah.
Well, we thank you very much for all the work that's gone into it and all the work still to be done. But I think, as you pointed out, there are a lot of themes that have come forth that we're all in agreement on. Thank you so much.